I've only met him once online.
He's fabulous. Yeah, really good guy.
Good afternoon to those of you who are joining us. Welcome. We're going to have a slightly different session today. So for those of you who are waiting for a poll, I'm afraid to say I'm going to disappoint you. So to sit back and please participate in a conversation that Bola and I are going to have today. So in terms of how we will use Slido, though, we will use it for Q&A. If you have a question, please do put it in there. And I would ask if you'd like to own your question today, because what we will try to do is, if you're happy and you do own the question, we'll open your microphone up and you can indeed join in the conversation. So don't just sit back. Today we're going to push some maybe hot buttons between us, Bola and I, we think. So please participate, whether you agree or disagree with things we say. Is that fair, Bola?
Absolutely spot on.
Great, thanks, Bola. That's super. So we just let a few more people get in. Like it every week, if you'd like to let us know who you are, where you're from, please do put that in the chat button. Whilst we'll be using Slido today for Q&A, we'll also be using it towards the end to get feedback. And I say today we're going to have a discussion rather than a presentation. We're going to be looking at the topic of collaboration, diversity, and inclusion. None of those in any particular order. So I think what we'll start to do is we'll get going, if you're okay, Bola, on this.
Absolutely.
Now, for those of you who have a long memory, Bola did actually run a similar session in June 2020. And what we thought was very appropriate was to actually get a little bit of update, given what's happened since January 2020, and to enter into what we hope will be quite an in-depth discussion with collaboration, diversity, inclusion as it relates to the construction sector, okay? That's our main area of interest. If we go off piste for a moment, bear with us, but we hope to stay stuck on that. So I don't know, Bola, whether you want to give people just a little bit of a background for those of you who don't know, you did not attend last time, a little bit of background about you.
Okay, so, and thanks again for the invitation, Howard. Also extended to Andrew and John Savage. So my name is Bola Abisogun, OBE. I am the founder and chairman of Diversity Surveyors. I wear several hats. I'm a chartered quantity surveyor by profession. And what can I say? We had a fabulous conversation last year, June. And I think that conversation stemmed from a request from John that spoke about my view personally on the back of George Floyd. So to relate that whole conundrum around race, etc., with construction, I articulated my previous work with EHRC, RICS, CIOB, and my reason behind setting up Diversity Surveyors in 2005-06. And, you know, pretty much a year plus, what are we now? 15 months on from that conversation. I have had stark, granular conversation with members of the industry, whether they're construction, surveying, engineering, architecture, about their current lived experience in a post-George Floyd, post-pandemic world. And, you know, the reality is it was bad last year. It is worse this year. And I think in net terms, well, actually, I don't think I know, in net terms, we are regressing very quickly for a number of different reasons. And I think part of the solution, as I've always said, will come from the conversations that aren't being had, the conversations that need to be had, and the conversations that will generate emotion, they'll generate awareness, and hopefully they will allow people to collaborate and be part of the solution, right? So that's a high level, nondescript statement of where I think we are in the, where we've come from in the last 15 months, right? But, you know, your request was where are we today, post-pandemic world, right? So I think that's where we should focus. And you mentioned, and I'll say it now, you've mentioned a key term, i.e. Black Lives Matter, and I'll leave it to you to frame the question, but let's have a conversation.
Okay, I mean, you and I actually sort of had a chat to begin with, and we quickly got to it. So let's put it on the table, Bola. Black Lives Matter has been quite polarizing from the outside. And I just wonder, I mean, there's two sides. Black Lives Matter has become quite politicized. But if we just stick with the construction sector, do you think it's actually hurt the change in the sector, or do you think it has had any positive effect in the sector?
I said before, and I'll say it again, it's a great question. And it's a great question because it has polarized the entire nation, right? And to that end, it's definitely polarized the construction industry. And I've no problem with polarization, as long as it doesn't introduce prejudice bias that detriments the lived experience and day-to-day experience of others. And that's exactly what's happened, whether we like it or not. As I see it, as a Black man, Black professional, Black business owner, the whole notion of Black Lives Matter has become offensive to many. It has, like you say, become hugely and highly politicized. And I'm not a politician. But what it hasn't done is force the conversations for the right reasons. So I'm not going to sit here and defend whether Black Lives Matter as a statement, movement or other is right or wrong. I'm not here to do that. To me, it's a distraction. I would sooner have the conversation that asks the question, why Black Lives Matter had to become better known or more aware as a statement, and why in relation to construction, it's worthy of a conversation to understand that at its core, what is it trying to say? What is Black Lives Matter trying to do as a statement, right? And in simple terms to me, because I'm a simple guy, it's really trying to say everyone matters. But historically, Black lives haven't featured in that everyone matters scenario, because the stats and the evidence tell you exactly why we haven't featured. If we as Black people had been part of that conversation, the stats today that talk about 2%, 3%, 4% of wouldn't be what they are in relation to our contribution and presence overall in society. So the disconnect and disproportionality is ridiculous, and the evidence speaks for itself. So I'm not even interested in talking about the stats. Let's talk about the why. Let's talk about the solution. Let's talk about the how. And that's pretty much what Black Lives Matter should be doing, but it isn't. And it's convenient for some to also use as an excuse not to talk about the real issues that may or may not exist in their business or across the sector. But it's a polarizing conversation, right?
Well, I don't want us to end up with this conversation.
Good.
What I would like to actually do is actually wind right the way back.
Yeah.
Because there was Equality and Human Rights Commission report produced specifically in 2009, which was actually about race and discrimination in the construction industry. So, here we are, 12 years on or so. Actually, I think I'd like to put some of the things that were decided at that time on the table and see what's happened. And actually, you might relate and say that BLM, Black Lives Matter, has put that further backwards or actually put it further forward. There was and I quote to people who've got it, and I've got it here, an action plan. And it said that the first thing in the action plan was launch a construction leadership diversity forum. First question I'd have, did it ever happen? And what was the outcome? And is it still going? And if it is, what's it doing?
Well, it did happen, and I did chair it. And as I did this entire piece of work for 2 years, but what happened was the appetite, the across the sector wasn't substantial enough. So it came across as more tokenism than substantive. And that was largely because it was just a lot to take in a very short space of time. And back in 2009-10, we were in the realms of the financial crash. The timing wasn't great. The consequences of the crash were taking out businesses and all the rest of it. There were so many other issues at the time that you could argue, as I said at the time, it's not the best time to really release the report. But EHRC said, look, we've got to do it. And it went out. And the CLDF, as it was known, that I chaired, just diminished over time. I think over 2 or 3 years, it just became a 2 or 3, 4 person talking forum. And it was then in its entirety gifted to the CITB, which then became the Be Fair, Fairness, Inclusion, Respect agenda, which it is and still remains today. So it had a value, it has a value today, but it hasn't changed anything materially. That's the outcome. And that's where we are today in 2021, and we're still asking the same questions. If you look at all of those recommendations, as I said to you before, all of the recommendations that were penned in 2009, 10, 11 are still relevant in 2021.
So let's just look at the sector. I mean, have there been, first question I say, actually, has there been, changes within the demographic statistics of this country across the whole nation, not just taking construction? Because the next question I'll have is, has construction kept pace if there have been demographic changes? If not, is the construction sector about on par, or is it behind other sectors?
On the democratic changes?
Yeah, have there been, in the last 10 years, have we seen huge demographic change, or are we just kidding ourselves that there is?
I think what we have seen is a genuine recognition that things could be better. I think senior leaders have recognized, okay, we see that we can improve. I think the issue then comes back to what needs to be improved, who needs to take hold of it, i.e., which leaders want to step up and be visible around taking control and owning the change that needs to happen, and what change has actually been measured, because we still have little or no metrics around the improvement, right? And clearly, it's been a decade. Something must have happened that was beneficial to this whole challenge, right? But in terms of contextualizing it and measuring it and putting it forward for evidence to people like me to interrogate and support or challenge, there's nothing there. In actual fact, Building Magazine, and I think I said this last year, Building Magazine ran a piece April 2019 saying we need to take a good look at ourselves, right? And they did a similar piece in 1999. That was 20 years apart. So, we are either going around in circles or there's just a lot of denial. And I think it's both, but the point is, because I'm a solutions focused guy, I'm like, okay, cool. Where are we? Who wants to have the conversation? And why do you want to have the conversation? Do you want to have the conversation because you want to be seen as doing the right thing? Do you want to have the conversation because some of your clients are saying we want to see more diversity in your bids? Do you want to have the conversation because you really buy into the fact that actually, as far as the war for talent is concerned and the way the world is moving and the effective emerging growth areas overseas, you need to have a more diverse talent pool? Where do you sit in that framework of ask, right? And that's the commercial driver. We've demonstrated beyond any question or reasonable doubt that there is a business case for this. So commercially, it makes sense. But tangibly and materially, it's a challenge. And I think there's a lot of denial. So, we need to unpick and unpack what leadership can do more of, or leadership should do better. And one of the things that leaders should do better is have open, honest, raw, maybe even emotive conversations about this entire subject matter. And I don't think we are.
Well, hopefully we can do a bit of that today. I mean, is the construction sector any worse than any other of sectors as far as you know? I mean, I know you only work within it, but in meeting other people from cross sectors in your work, do you think we're any worse as a sector? Just as
Well,
bad?
I mean, and this is probably one of the reasons why I'm able to stay in my lane, because my evidence around construction is quite deep. But we had a webinar with the Bridge Group earlier this year, and the Bridge Group has worked with accountancy, they've worked with finance, they've worked with health and law, I think. And comparably, in terms of sectors, we are behind others. So I think top of the list would be, or could be, accountancy, and then health, and then law. But construction is lagging behind for a number of different reasons. Number one, we are such a fragmented sector. And that's probably our biggest challenge. We're just all over the place. So it's hard to measure progress as a collective. So our fragmentation actually doesn't do us any good at all.
I mean, you're a surveyor. I mean, how many other surveyors of BAME background actually, exist? I know you actually put it down as diversity surveyors. How many people do you actually have as UK members?
In the UK, we've got about 1,000 members. So no, in the UK, we have about 500 members. Across the globe, we've got about 1,200 members.
So 500, what does 500 represent as a percentile? Because I mean, surveying is a profession, isn't it? I mean, so what does it present in a profession?
Let's look at it this way. So currently, as of Tuesday this week, Barry Cullen, RICS, produced a figure of 5%. So 5% of 141,000 globally, right? So that's 7,000 BAME. Now, the challenge is, how do you break the 7,000 down to represent Black, Asian, minority ethnic? Minority ethnic could be anything across the Eastern Bloc, as you know. So I'm of the opinion that we're still in the 2% mark. So if you said 2% of global membership, that's less than 3,000, right, across the globe. So
to look at our own sector in the UK, are we better or worse than our European counterparts, or as our global counterparts?
Well, I think the representation of surveyors in the UK is probably quite good as a number. But I'm focused on the growth, and the growth with the surveying profession is not in the UK. The growth is actually in emerging areas like Africa, for example, where we have a population of nearly 1.7 billion, right? So that's huge growth potential. And that growth potential is looking at the UK for evidence of what they're doing well or not. And in terms of representation, particularly at senior level, there's not a lot of inspiration. So, where we have an opportunity here is to demonstrate that we have inclusive employers and organizations that are showcasing talent at all levels across their business. Talent seems to stop around the mid-management level. Beyond that, it's quite sparse, right? So internationally, outside looking in, people are still asking the question, where are the senior leaders that are Black and or Asian in the UK? And that's a challenging question, because today there's less than 20 at senior level, but they're not partners or anything like that. You know what I mean? We've got a long way to go.
Do we have any of those in the construction sector in any way? Any of those leaders?
We've got a few
leaders. Yeah.
A few.
Influential enough? Do they really head up large organizations, or are they, large associations, professions? Are they able to push it forward?
I'm talking to a lot of them, and they are not where they could be, put it that way. They are fairly senior within the ranks of their own organizations, but as a landscape, we're still lacking at senior decision-making levels. We're still lacking.
So why do you think there is underrepresentation of non-white ethnic minority workers in the construction sector? Yeah.
Two things. Firstly, the leaky pipe, as I call it, which is we come in, we join, we start to perform, but they don't stay because of a number of different reasons, but largely working environments aren't conducive or aren't equipping them with the skills they need to thrive. So they tend to leave. So we come in, we leave, we drop out. I call it the leaky.
But is that any different to being white when you say working
No.
conditions? No. So
no, I don't think so. I think there are different reasons why. Yeah. So we can all coexist in the same working space, but if I am one of 20 individuals and I am the only non-white in that number of 20, then my day-to-day existence is going to be quite different for a number of different reasons. And if within the context of that 20-person environment, things are said or done that either offend or don't inspire me to stay in that environment, then after a period of time, you may decide to move on. And that's what happens generally. And it's not always intentional, but it happens. And where you don't feel you have allies or others who can resonate with your why, and it just makes it easier to move. So the need and desire to move is so prevalent across the BAME group, Black in particular, that it's hard to build a corporate presence in any one place. I mean, I very rarely hear or know of Black professionals who stay in the same working environment for more than 5 years because they feel they need to move on. I never stayed in the same employer for more than 2.5 years, more than 3 years.
But I think that's actually not just BAME people. I think you'll find that modern youth as a whole, young people, they don't like staying any longer than about 5 years.
Agreed, but I'm talking retrospectively now. I'm talking over the last 27 years.
Right.
So particularly in the last 2 years, and definitely post-pandemic, the attrition rate that I'm aware of, because people are coming to me and asking me whether I know other employers that are recruiting, it's been phenomenal. And obviously the furlough scheme ended yesterday. I'm expecting a tsunami because it just feels like that is what is going to happen, particularly across the BAME group. Now, why that happens is another question, but I want to focus on how we can reduce that kind of impact and maybe create more of an inclusive working environment that allows people to thrive and stay where they are.
But the level of organizations in the construction sector who are still on furlough is actually very, very small, because
Correct.
The sector itself has been really the only sector that has actually worked through the whole of the pandemic, but unaffected. But having said it's unaffected, there's huge, great skill shortages. There are huge, great labor shortages being reported before we even go on to supply chain issues.
That's right.
So, do you think the construction sector is tapping in to the labor market, which includes BAME individuals, and that these BAME individuals have the skills that the sector wants? So, for instance, have the colleges attracted BAME people to go and become bricklayers, electricians, and that sort of thing? Or are these professions that BAME people avoid for whatever reasons you think they avoid them?
It's a really interesting question. I think the colleges are doing what they can to attract skill and try and connect with employment, particularly on the apprenticeship route. But generally, on the trade side in particular, I'm seeing a lot more independent companies form, and they're being formed by Black and Asian business owners who have the technical skills themselves. So they're brickies, they're carpenters, they're painters, or whatever. And they're deciding to go into business on their own to try and capitalize and win their own contracts. That is a consequence of the general sentiment across the sector, so that they feel more in control of their own destiny. But I think the labor shortage piece and the skills piece has been a car crash for over a decade. And it's largely because many haven't had the opportunity to join businesses and grow in businesses, again, for a number of different reasons. So I've always said, unless and until we have more prominent BAME-led and owned entities we are not going to create the critical mass required to make a tangible contribution to the needs of the sector. What you will have is still a fragmented community of non-white professionals that are doing various things in various places in various ways for various reasons, but critically, they don't have the presence almost to command the opportunities that they deserve. And so it's a tricky one.
Okay, I'm going to come to a question I'm going to put in a minute, but we have one from Emmanuel Steele. So let's deal with that one as it comes through. Is there a sector of Black and ethnic workers in the construction sector who stay in one company, and he's put in brackets long term, close brackets, for fear of not finding another role or lack of progressive opportunity, that he's put in brackets as effectively stuck, close brackets? So you can look at that question if you go to the chat, but I think hopefully you've probably got it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, it's a wonderful question from a great colleague, actually. And I think I'm going to assume what he's trying to say there. Is there a sector of Black and ethnic workers in the sector who stay in one company? And I'm not aware of one or that. But again, you know, the fear of not finding another role if you become pigeonholed, as we colloquially term it, is a real problem. It's the reason why I actually kept moving when I was very early in my career, for fear of getting pigeonholed. You know, you join a firm thinking they'll give you the opportunity, exposure, and projects. And, you know, in my case, I ended up in a firm for 9 months measuring ironmongery. I mean, Christ, come on. So I wasn't inspired. I had to move. But, you know, the lack of progressive opportunity, that is a conundrum that is created by a number of different reasons. You could just have bad managers who just don't recognize that you're good enough to have exposure to a number of different things. And if those managers don't recognize your true potential, you will become frustrated and you will then feel, actually, I've got to move. So the being stuck, the lack of long-term positions, I think is a consequence of being in those environments just aren't conducive to allow people to thrive. Now, you're right, it's not a Black thing or an Asian thing, it's just a thing that exists. And perhaps in my case, because I'm so driven and so, you know, I'm hungry for success, right? So if I don't see it, I'm going to look elsewhere. And my urgency to look elsewhere is because I need to think about my own career. And today, I think people are doing the opposite. People are saying, actually, I need to maybe sit still because the environment's so fragile, businesses are so temperamental, workflows are so without a risk. Is it worth trying to move? And you know, if you're deciding not to move, great. But if you have moved, is it you're going from, as my mom would say, from frying pan to fire? You know, the fear of the unknown is also a reason why people are not moving, right? So there are so many layers. You know, bad managers are unconscious bias. You know, the whole unconscious bias thing is another conversation in its own right. But
I think this is quite an interesting sort of topic we got into here, and certainly Emmanuel is bringing that up. So I wonder, Abraham, if we could bring Emmanuel in on both a microphone and a camera, and he engaged in the conversation with us. So if we could please do that, that would be superb. I hope he doesn't mind. I'm sure he won't if he's asking questions under his own name. So I don't want to embarrass him, but if you could please do that, and you enter into the conversation with us, Emmanuel, I'd really appreciate that. So whilst that's happening, I mean, I'm very interested, as you know, on collaboration. And so I want to come back to how people might perceive collaboration. So let's not forget that topic.
Okay.
Given, you know, there are, as we've said, polarization happening.
Definitely.
And polarization does not help collaboration. So please don't let me forget that, and I'll come back. Okay. So is Emmanuel joined us?
If you can hear me, I'm slightly camera shy, but I'm here, Howard.
Okay. Please put your questions. Please put your questions to Bola, and let's get this topic of unconscious bias, etc., on the table.
Well, being on the table shouldn't be a hijack or a diversion from the central point of the debate. but it was just in reflection to my own experiences, really, that, you know, leading into the opportunities for people like myself in the construction industry, are there many people who feel or who felt that the lack of progression may have thwarted their opportunities to move to other companies? And could that lack of progression have really been attuned to a bad environment, if we're talking about the wider understanding of companies and individuals who genuinely are good people? And then if we are leaning towards the environment being a non-progressive place for some professionals of my background, then is there an underlying unconscious bias that disadvantages people like myself without anybody really noticing? So could we call that the invisible battle for somebody who would probably have spent a long time in the industry and, you know, may have felt that they hadn't been recognized sufficiently to progress to, you know, apply for a job? It made more sense to wait for the promotion than to move sideways, so to speak. And that's just an example of maybe a minority within the minority. But it was just something I put on the table.
I think it's great. Before you answer that question, Bola, you've probably seen in the chat.
I have.
We have. Shall we bring Sani Salisu in, please, Abraham? Because I think, you know, everyone will read the chat, but I think to elaborate on that would be really good. So, Sani, I hope you'll join us on the microphone. And if you're camera shy, that's fine. But I hope you're here, and please do add to the conversation.
Hello. Yes, thanks for giving me the opportunity to actually speak. Listening to the conversations, and where do I begin? I think, well, I've connected with Paula before on LinkedIn, and we've had a conversation previously. Myself, I would say I was stuck in a company with a mindset of who else is going to take me, and wherever I go, I'm always going to be an individual from the ethnic minority background, because it's just not many out there within my profession. I was a gas engineer, well respected by some of my colleagues, and at the same time, while working with other trades within the same company, you know, I'd face your casual racism, your blatant racism, and everything else. But knowing that I had nowhere to sort of go to report those things were a difficult situation for me, because how can I trust a system that is not built to be fair? And so I was stuck in that mindset for a while. I built myself up, educated myself, become stronger, so I was able to actually challenge some of the people on a day-to-day basis. And eventually, after going through 5 internal interviews with highly qualified, more than majority of my colleagues, getting the roles that I was quite shocked that I wasn't given the opportunity to have, I eventually stepped out of the company, and things are open to move bigger and better from there. But you know, within the housing sector, you all probably aware there's very limited ethnic minorities within those sector, and within that sector as well, you then got the trades, and as Paula was saying, majority of the ethnic minorities are actually stepping away, setting up their own companies, because they just don't see themselves within those institutes either progressing or given a fair chance whenever they apply for jobs. For me to actually apply for the job that I got now as a gas compliance officer, which is a step up from gas engineer, the company I had applied for, it gave me confidence to apply for them, because they use the Rooney Rule through their recruitment process. And they also signed up to the Deeds Not Words pledge by TIPUB, which for me is trying to bring the equity within the ethnic minority background to make sure that we're actually being accounted for. And for somebody like myself that works hard and try to stay on top of what's going on and my colleagues, I find it difficult that a company that I worked for almost 11 years could not see that and could not use my talent and my energy to further themselves and progress themselves. And as I mentioned in the group or in the chat, they employed 420 staff in a very diverse city and only 12 ethnic minority while I was there. That shows they got a long way to go, which I hope they have identified that now. And yeah, having this conversation is really good, but how do we make it better for the next generation? And that's one of the passion and the energy that I like to bring to the table, and to try and find a platform to use. And some of you probably noticed some of my videos floating on LinkedIn last 2 weeks ago with the Gas Safety Week. Those are part of the things that I want to showcase myself in order to try and attract more ethnic minorities to come into these industries, to come into these housing associations sectors, because we are not serving our communities and the community at large, because those skills are just not there within the ethnic minority group. Thank you.
Thanks. And I think just before you say, Paula, 12 out of 420, by my math, and I've just quickly done it, is just under 3%. So when you were talking about, you know, percentiles in the profession, it would seem going down to the trade skills level about the same. Pretty appalling, really.
But the evidence doesn't lie. And thanks, Sunny, for that interjection. And Emmanuel, fabulous question, which, you know, what resonated with me was when you spoke about perversely waiting for the promotion. That's the carrot and stick approach that I've just never really aligned myself with. So, you know, Sandy said the same thing, Emmanuel said the same thing. Question is, what can be done? What should be done? What will be done? I'm not losing hope, but I'm becoming more realistic. And the fact is, the issue isn't about whether we can or cannot participate. The issue is cultural. The issue is a long, multi-generational cultural challenge that we need to find a way to address as a sector. And that's why these conversations are relevant and useful. But it's cultural, you know, the stats don't lie, the evidence doesn't lie. You'll have testimony after testimony, whether it's Emmanuel, Sani, myself, others in the DCS network. The common denominator is lack of opportunity, right? And that's what we need to talk about.
Sure, lack of opportunity, though, in a world where we're short of labor, we're short of skills, is fine. And I see it as a two-sided issue here. You know, and people would say, and I have lived in a black country, by the way, so I have suffered racism the other way around. Oh no, it does happen.
Of course
it does happen. I think people need to realize that, is that you know, you have to look at things and see what you have to offer, and you actually have to get people to appreciate that. And so, you know, the first question I'd have is, what is the sector doing to attract a diverse workforce? And secondly, what is it that the diverse workforce would like to get from the sector, which is clearly things here, equal opportunity. So why is that not happening in a country that actually preaches all the time about equal opportunity?
Fabulous question. But I think the elephant in the room again is, it's like the corporate whitewash that happened post George Floyd. Lots of statements went up, oh, with this, with that. A year in, where's the evidence? Let's just look at the last 12 months. Where is your evidence that your statement has translated into action? And so I think when we talk about a country that extols the benefits of equal opportunity and fairness, etc., historically, there is a footprint, there is a chronological evidence base that says, okay, we talk a good game, but we haven't actually delivered Maybe we don't know how, maybe we don't want to, maybe we're in denial, whatever the case is. But generally, it hasn't changed. And it hasn't changed because culturally, it's still a challenge to accept that talent has no color. That's what I say, talent has no color, right? So why is it that because of my color, you have an issue? And it can be boiled down to that very simple dynamic, because I said to you earlier on, and pretty much it may be the case for others too. We have a great colleague here, Audley English. His credibility on paper is phenomenal. Audley English as an architect in the MMC space. My credentials, I've been told, are offensive. You know, I've been told, Bola, your profile is offensive. You know, who do you think you are? How much more can? And it's not that we want to be seen as the greatest thing since sliced bread. We just have to continuously demonstrate that we are equipped to participate. And because we generally have to try a lot harder for a lot longer, as a consequence, we evolve in different ways. So we cannot take for granted that we had to get O levels and A levels or whatever. We had to go beyond that and get an MSc. You got the MSc, you wanted a PhD. You got the PhD, you wanted to get a second PhD. Not because you had to, but because you had to continue to evolve to be better. And constantly trying to be better makes you more equipped. And the better equipped you are, the more you can do, the more you can command. But when you want to compare apples with apples, you generally can't do that because some of your peers may not have the same credentials. And then you get the fear factor kicking, you get the whole notion of, well, we can't have him or her taken on our glory, et cetera, et cetera. Those human instincts kick in about preservation. So what happens is the challenge becomes a different challenge, not one of whether you are worthy to be here. It becomes, well, if you are here, you stay behind me, know your place kind of thing. And that is what literally triggers others to go and set up on their own, as Sani has done, as I did, as many others have done. But the question is, to your point around collaboration, in a tech data-driven world where collaboration is mission critical now, the dynamics have changed because I no longer have to ask for permission to thrive. I just get on and do. If you love what you see, great, jump on and join me, as people are doing, particularly with the work I'm doing at Cambridge and the CDBB in the digital twin space, right? So digital twin talks about collaboration from de facto. So if it's a mindset, and if you don't have the mindset of sharing and caring and collaborating, you're going to get left behind. Not because we want you to, but because technology doesn't care, right? So this is the dynamic that shifted the entire conversation from one of, well, should you be allowed to compete, to one of, will we be able to compete with you? And this is where you're seeing a different dynamic enter the conversation now. And as far as I'm concerned, I've never been more excited because all of a sudden, it's not really about who you know, it's about what you're doing and what you're bringing to the table. And if what you're bringing to the table is commercially astute, ethically aware, and inclusive by its very nature, it will evolve anyway. And those that don't have the mindset of collaboration and sharing, regrettably, may find themselves in another challenge that says, well, I've got to find a way to get into this conversation. I've got to find a way to contribute. I've got to find a way to, you know, and because maybe you don't have the social networks or the emotional intelligence to do that well, because emotional intelligence is very, very important today, it's a different challenge that you'll be entering. And I think that the industry today is in a flux around emotional intelligence and what that means in a collaborative world. That's the real challenge here. It's cultural. It's not procedural. It's not about the business case. It's not about your statements. It's not about your policies. It's literally, do you have the right headset, mindset to thrive in a world that is completely connected? It's a completely different challenge now.
We've got a question here, which you've already put down as great question in the chat, which comes from Audley. And I think, you know, I'd like to look at it two ways. We've got here, how do you encourage and support BAME companies to become tier one? But I'd also say, how do you encourage tier one companies to actually wake up and realize all the opportunities they could create for Bain people and how that would actually help their business to flourish. So it's sort of two-sided there.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
how do you encourage Bain companies to become tier one? And how do you encourage already tier one companies to recruit, promote, and make the most of all the skills that Bain people could bring?
You know, again, another great question. And, you know, Audley knows this well. He has tried to build those supply chain. He is in the supply chain in that capacity. Has he been given tier one capability and opportunity? Not at the scale that he deserves and can command. Fact. Now, why is that? My view is the commissioning agents themselves, the clients themselves, are not buying in the right way. What they have done historically is they've delegated that responsibility, whether it be Section 106 or social value. They've delegated that to the appointed tier one, and the tier ones have gone out to the market and found people like me and Audley and who else. We become tier 2 or 3, but we are not treated in the manner that allows us to grow and become tier 1. In fact, to become a tier 1, having had a tier 1 as your client is offensive. How can you then compete with what was once your client? Is basically what's happening, right? So clients need to understand that if they're going to spend X amount per annum, they should be bold enough to say, actually, of our 100% spend, we're going to allocate ring fence 5, 10, 15% of that spend to minority-led businesses. Not because the law says we must, but because we know it's the right thing to do. And until you get clients boldly making those decisions, you won't have tier ones grow or evolve in the UK. And you cannot expect tier ones in the UK to treat BAME-led entities in a fair way. I'm living proof that it doesn't happen. My car crash of an experience is yet to be concluded. And again, why is it? Why is it that even in 2021, I couldn't name you half a dozen Black or BAME-led owned companies in the public sector, because I think the private sector is a slightly different challenge, that are achieving significant numbers. I couldn't give you 6. I'd struggle to give you 1 or 2. Household names, Black-led, Black-owned in the public sector, particularly delivering construction and repairs. They're just not there, right? And why is that? Yet I can fly to Atlanta in 8 hours. I can sit with H.J. Russell, the largest Black-owned construction company in the Southeast. They're running easily 350 to 400 million turnover per annum, largely from the public dollar contracts. And why? Because they have legislative support, they have affirmative action. So unless and until we make some structural changes, we are going to continue to receive this conversation around best endeavors and hope for the best.
I was going to ask you what do you think can be done? And already you just mentioned something there. But does this need to be politically driven? Or is it this could actually be driven within the sector? It doesn't have to be political. This is someone within the sector grasping it. Have you had, I mean, I'd be interested, I don't want to be naming or shaming here, but have you had these conversations with the big tier 1 companies?
Have I? Of course, yeah.
Yeah, and what is their reaction?
Well,
I mean, is it just merely words, or actually are they doing anything about it?
Yeah, I'm not going to denigrate any of the Build UK members, because all the ones I've worked with are Build UK members, right? And we have well-documented challenges around why it didn't work. But I've no interest in talking to the Build UK members. I want to talk to the clients that are spending the money anyway. I'm saying to them, you need to take an informed view around the old excuse pre-Brexit was owed you. Post-Brexit, it's no longer owed you. It's now, what will you be prepared to do differently? We've had the recent Transforming Procurement Green Paper through Cabinet Office. I responded to that too. But the point is, at this juncture, clients should be saying, why don't we just ring fence money? Why don't we just ring fence a percentage of our annual spend? Go and find those guys and girls we know can deliver because they have evidence to suggest that they can, whether they've been the tier 2, 3, 4 of our existing supply chains, and let's give them a tier 1 chance. That's what needs to happen. It's not rocket science. It's not rocket science at all. But if there's no will, it won't happen. And to date, there hasn't been a will to do it.
And you don't see that changing in light of the labour and skill shortages?
realistically, I see change on the horizon. I'm in conversations now. How long will it take to translate into commercial opportunity? That's the question. Everyone's talking a good policy game at the moment. Policy takes 2 to 3 years to manifest into reality. So you look in 2025. We have a skills crisis right now.
Yeah, which the government doesn't seem to want to meet in any field by saying, well, we'll offer visas to people to go back. So we have to make the most of what we have in our society. And you know, from what I'm hearing from you is we are far away from being an inclusive society, really.
Well, we have an ambition to be referred to in the UK as an inclusive society, and comparably to many areas of Europe, they probably are better in some ways. But commercially, and from a construction perspective, we're lacking, in my view, in terms of that inclusive ambition, because it's still very much a homogenous leadership and a sector led by largely white men. So
who do not want to change,
who are fearful of what change could mean. I think they would be prepared to change if they thought change doesn't mean them losing absolute control of their piece of the pie. But because that fear of the unknown is generic, their view is, I'm not having it, I'm not changing, because I can't have others coming and being bigger and better than me.
So if there was an organization that showed that willingness, do you think the community itself, the BAME community, would respond to that? Or do you think the BAME community would be actually rather fearful and even think, well, actually, we're being tricked with, you know, so is there a resistance the other way as well?
I think, of course, but I have been that bold individual. I mean, look, there is not a contractor in this country that doesn't know me. So, but I'm not going to have that public conversation. What I would want to say is, fine, the Build UK members will exist in their entirety. What needs to happen is another subsector within the sector needs to evolve. And to evolve, they need to be given a commercial opportunity. And for that commercial opportunity to be offered on fair and reasonable terms, and it to be awarded to those who are credible and can evidence that they have done the work in the past. Now, there are plenty of those entities in existence, but they are still not being given the fair access, which translates into the opportunity. So we need clients to be bold. This is not a tier one contractor conversation. This is a client-led conversation, as it always has been.
Right. So do you think the business secretary, Kwasi Kwarteng, I mean, seriously, do you think he will have any influence in this area?
Can I say, well, I smile because I've just penned a draft letter to him. My entire advisory group, we work with the Mayor of London. So Sadiq Khan, I chair the Moving Them Up initiative, and literally in my email inbox last night, the Secretariat has just finished the draft letter going to Kwasi and a number of others. And the focus is not actually about Black business, it's about young Black men entering the sector and the profession being opportunity. But you know, it's a layered conversation, and it translates into the options. One of the options is self-employment, one of the other options is business development, etc. But the overarching conversation is, can you help us to challenge the sector around inviting, engaging, and providing opportunities to young Black men across London? And that letter is about to go out on Monday. So,
well, great. So I think we're going to sort of pull this together and say, perhaps you can return 2 or 3 months and let us know, you know, what is happening politically. So. What is happening politically?
Happy to do so.
Yeah, so that's super. So thanks very much, and thanks for everyone who's participated. What I'd like to do is to say that the feedback survey is open. Please let us know if you like this type of conversation, because a lot of the sessions we have are very much informative in the sense that people put up PowerPoint, etc. We tried today to put onto the table a topic that people don't particularly want to put on the table, but we recognize that it needs to be put on the table. So, you know, I'd like to thank everyone who's participated. We've recorded it. We will make sure it does get out into whatever bazaars we can to try and make changes. And we will ask Bola back again to update us as to how he has felt the business secretary has responded.
Absolutely.
As far as today is concerned, any of you who have participated today who want to apply for a CPD certificate, if we could please put that up on the screen, Abraham. So we're just screen sharing. Oh, okay, that's great. So to receive your certificate of attendance for the CPD, I'm sure, Bola, you'll be putting in for your CPD for yourself. Please go to MyProPass CE 820. Thanks very much for that to everyone. Now, we also have another session coming up next week. Do we have a slide for that one? Yeah, there we go.
Oh,
Creating value as a contractor on framework. So that will be at noon next Friday. So please do register. Please do come along. We have a person from Henry Boot Construction who's going to come along and take us through that. So all I'm going to say now is please do give us feedback. We really do appreciate this. It does enable us to learn and to change. The questions are quite simple. I'll put them up on the screen while we've got them here because it is an opportunity now for you to do it. So please put them up on the screen, Abraham. All we ask is, did the session hold your interest? Please give us a score. Second question, I hope you were encouraged to participate. And for those of you who sent in questions, I do hope I managed to include them all. If not, put it down, it was my fault. The content was pertinent and relevant to my role and my work. I think the whole thing was actually not just to my work. I think it was pertinent and relevant to the whole sector. What I learned will help me in my role at work. Maybe, maybe not, but we hope to change things. And lastly, if you have any open points, if you'd recommend others to attend this session, too late, but do recommend people to recording. And finally, how could the session be improved?
okay.
Thanks very much. We'll leave this open for another 10 minutes or so, and your feedback would be really appreciated. And I'll remind you again, Craig Finn from Henry Boot will be joining us next week. Please do tune in. Bola, would you like to say anything at the end?
No, just a thank you, really. Yeah, and hope to be back in 3 months, hopefully, if you're
We'll put it in now. Perhaps a post-Christmas spot when we've all enjoyed a good time, hopefully. Okay, many thanks to everyone.
Yeah.
And see you again soon.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Have a great
Cheers,
weekend.
guys.
Thanks. Bye. Thanks, Bola, very much for